Okay, so now we're going to talk about the inverse of a function. First of all, in order to have an inverse of a function, the function has to be 1 to 1. So has to be 1 to 1. Okay, so we're going to have two things. We're going to have a function, f, or g, or h, and then we're going to have the inverse of that function. Okay, so I'm going to think first of just a simple function. Let's say we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, 6. So just 3 ordered pairs. It's a finite set of ordered pairs. And we could do a mapping. We could say, well, it's 1, 3, and 5 as the inputs, and 2, 4, and 6 as the outputs. Okay. We're mapping 1 to 2, 3 to 4, 5 to 6. So yes, it's a 1 to 1 function. Okay? And let's call this function f. All right. So if we want to know the domain and range, the domain for our function, for f, the domain would be 1, 3, and 5. The range would be 2, 4, and 6. Now that's kind of review. We've done this type of thing with functions before. But now we're going to talk about what the inverse is. The inverse is where you switch the x's and the y's. Okay, the x's become the y's and the y's become the x's. You're switching the domain and the range. Okay, so in the world of the inverse, then my domain is going to be 2, 4, and 6, and my range is going to be the 1, 3, and 5. So if I wanted to set up a mapping for the inverse, now this is the inverse, okay, still in the inverse, I would have 2, 4, 6, and 1, 3, 5. 2 would map to 1, 4 would map to 3, and 6, oh, that's supposed to be a 5. 6 would map to 5. And so the inverse would look like the set of ordered pairs 2, 1, 4, 3, and 6, 5. That would be the inverse. Now the notation for the inverse looks like this. F inverse. So it's a superscript of -1. And it looks like an exponent, but it's not. It's the inverse notation. So over here we have the original function, f, with its domain and its range and the mapping. Over here, I'll put it in orange, over here, this is the world of the inverse for that problem. Okay? So you have two things. You have a function, and then you have the inverse of that function. Okay, so we'll give you an example now. All right. It says find the inverse of, and then it gives us, this is our function then. I'll just call it f. That's our function. To find the inverse, then we're going to take each ordered pair and we're going to switch the x and y. So it's going to be 4, 0, 7, 1, 10, 2, and 13, 3. This is the inverse. We would write for notation f inverse because it's the inverse of f. Okay? So the domain for the inverse, the domain of inverse, is going to be the set 4, 7, 10, and 13. The range of the inverse, so you kind of have to say which one's which. There's notation, but I won't get into that right now. The range of the inverse is 0, 1, 2, and 3. And we'll see another example in the next video.